everybody, and welcome to Season 6 of the podcast. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for 5+ years at this point, but I am excited to be back and looking forward to lots of new conversations with emerging writers, MFA faculty members, debut authors, and more. If you fall into one of these categories, you might be asking yourself, how do I get on this program and talk about my experience? Well, you're in luck. We are now accepting new applications for potential Season 6 guests. So, if you are interested, head over to mfawriters.com, scroll down a bit, then click on the button that says Apply. That will take you to a short questionnaire that you can fill out for a chance to be on the show. Hopefully, I'll get to talk to some of you soon. In the meantime, you can find MFA Writers on Instagram and Twitter, as well as mfawriters.com. We love to hear from listeners, so feel free to shoot us a direct message on one of those platforms, or an email at mfawriterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a minute to rate or review the show, the best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts. Doing so will help boost our podcast as we try to boost these amazing writers. Also, as I mentioned, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, you can apply at mfawriters.com. On that same website, you can also click the support button to support us financially, if it's within your means. Or you can do so by going directly to buymeacoffee.com/mfawriters. Finally, as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Welcome to MFA Writers, the podcast where we talk to creative writing MFA students about their program, their process, and a piece they're working on. I'm your host, Jared McCormick. Today I'm with James T. Morrison. James is a recent graduate of California State University, Fresno, more commonly known as Fresno State, where he received his MFA in creative nonfiction. He serves as the nonfiction editor at the Normal School Literary Magazine, and his work has appeared or is forthcoming in Slate, Diode, River Teeth's Beautiful Things, and Fugue. You can hear him talk about his writing and American drug policy on the award-winning podcast Death, Sex, and Money. Today, James is going to read a piece titled Spread.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, this is part of a triptych that was in Fugue a little while back. Spread is jail nomenclature for the improvised meals made after the official ones. So this is Spread. Your cell looks like this: gray, cinder block walls, same as the ceiling. The floor is that familiar kind of sealed concrete found in parking garages, the slick surface a perfect place to pop tricks on rainy days when the city was too wet to skate, back when fun was still a thing you had. The toilet is stainless steel, along with the sink and 2 human body-sized shelves bolted to the wall, hovering bunk beds, each equipped with a pretend mattress. At night, after dinner but before lockup, newspapers across the block are carefully unfolded and spread out on the ground, the print's black and whiteness at home with the gray. Items emerge from totes kept hidden as best a thing can be in here, ingredients placed like poker chips on the newspaper. Buy-in. Bologna wrapped in a napkin from the dry white bread sandwiches at lunch, thin Salisbury steak from dinner, some of what came beside it, corn and green beans and carrots with that fresh from the can sheen, oranges sliced in smiling wedges, packets of pepper, lime, and chili powder, 3 bricks of ramen broken up, 1 from each person, along with the accompanying pouch of that powdered goodness, monosodium glutamate in a little foil packet labeled succinctly and simply flavor. All of it goes in the clear 3-gallon trash bag, unused, of course. The faucet in the cell operates off 2 buttons, dispensing 10 seconds of hot or cold water with each press. After a few cycles, the hot reaches its max, and the designated chef, your cellmate, Stoney, fills the bag until its contents are covered, ties the top. He plugs the drain with a washcloth, fills the sink with more hot water. He floats the bag in the basin, which always reminds you of that goldfish you won at the fair as a kid, the one that, when added to your small aquarium at home, passed around the red dot on its gill until they all eventually floated to the surface, milky-eyed and breathless. As the concoction steeps, the three of you sit around, chop it up, shoot the shit, wait. You Stony, always too loud, the joyous banter a signal to Gull that spread is on the way. People call when Gull comes around because they know he's about to ask for a handout, some snack from your commissary tote, or a forkful of that improvised dinner after the official, shittier one. Gull doesn't have anyone on the outside to put money on his books. He has no way to buy his own food. You feel bad for him. He's looking for generosity in a place with little space for it. On the day of your first commissary delivery, when Gull asked for a bag of chips, Stony schooled you. "Don't do it," he said sternly. "You'll regret that, I promise." Gull looked at you, then at Stony, acting out an exaggerated version of disbelief. Stony didn't even look at him, just kept a deadpan expression and shook his big head at you. You are generous at heart, mostly spurred by the desperate desire to be liked by all, but you trust Stony. It's a lesson you will carry with you forever. No is a complete sentence. It's time. Stony lifts the bag, takes the rag out of the sink, lets the basin drain. He holds the bag like a severed head, stabs it repeatedly with a pencil, creating several evenly spaced holes on its side and bottom. A sieve. The holes look like tiny mouths spitting broth into the sink, just like those cherubs on the fountain in front of the downtown library. You keep this memory to yourself, though you don't have to. You'll come to find out that the dudes in county do a lot of reading, that no one would make fun of you for loving books. You sidle up next to Stony, let the steam coil around your face, gently inhale the strange brew, in awe that something so delicious can come from the worst kind of cafeteria scraps and commissary snacks. Notice how he carries the bag, one hand under its bottom like a newborn, laying it down gently on the newspaper. Notice the way he tears the bag, carefully down the middle, its squiggly guts spilling out like roots beyond the edges of ripped plastic. Notice how the oranges shine like slices of a cartoon sun, glistening with broth, soaking the black and white and gray beneath them.
James, that was great. Really, really great stuff. Thank you so much for reading that and for being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You read a lot about addiction, and as listeners can probably tell from that piece, about some difficult experiences you've had. And I'm curious to hear how important the writing has been for you in processing those experiences. But first, I want to go back and understand your relationship to writing and how that all started. So you told me writing has always been something you were interested in. So what are some of your earliest memories of writing?
When I was probably just learning to read, I used to drag this giant typewriter out of our garage. It was an old manual typewriter. And I loved the way the keys felt. It was so like percussive. Something about pressing them and then watching the lever snap up and like hit it against the page. And I think before I was even formally learning to write, I was like copying children's books. There's this old 60s book called Baseball Mouse or something like that. And yeah, I had a lot of really old books because I have brothers that are way older than I am. And so yeah, that's how it started for me, really. I've just always been fascinated by books.
So you would take out your like favorite books and you would just like type them, like transcribe the books on the typewriter?
Yeah, I would like copy like the letters. I knew I could do that much, right? Like I could match up what was what. And that was kind of like part of how I learned to write, really.
Yeah, that's great. I did a similar thing, but maybe like something I shouldn't be proud of. But when I was a kid, I used to take the books that I really loved and then just like kind of rip them off. You know, I'd write like my own stories that were like essentially the same thing, but I would just like change some of the characters around or like insert myself into it. I did that a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think that's something to be proud of because great artists steal, right? Like that's
Yeah,
how you learn how to, there's no, and that's what, I don't know, a program's all about, right? Is teaching you how to sort of copy in your own way what's already there.
Yeah, I guess maybe I just wasn't as good as copying from other great writers. I mean, I remember like the titles were like exactly the same as the other book. It's like, I'm not even trying to hide it, you know?
That's awesome. That is awesome.
And I also remember my grandfather's typewriter, which I still have actually, and just how magical that machine felt when I was a kid. I wonder if that's a common experience.
Yeah. I collect typewriters now, and I would assume that, like, I don't know, there's just something I would never dream of writing a book on a typewriter, but there just is something so wonderful about them as a machine.
So where do you think that early interest in writing came from?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure I know. My house wasn't it was I mean, there was readers in my house for sure, but it wasn't like a hyper literary house. My parents weren't educators or anything like that. I think that from the very beginning, there was just something about being able to put my thoughts on the page. Like I look back at even some of my earlier writing, and even in like fourth grade, I'm talking about like in a fourth grader's language, feeling like not being able to figure out why I feel sad or whatever it is. So I think I've
Right.
always sort of just been drawn to that kind of confessional thing, I guess.
And there's something about putting the words on the page that like organizes your thoughts in a way that you just, in my experience, cannot do just in your head, right? You know, like your thoughts suddenly become clearer in some different way once they're on the page.
I think Joan Didion said, I don't know what I think until I write it down, which it's like one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And that definitely resonates with me. So you're a nonfiction writer and you tell really honest personal stories, which I always admire in nonfiction writers. I'm a fiction writer, so I get to kind of couch it in fiction a little bit. I think it takes a lot of guts to just lay it all out there. When did you decide that this genre was the one for you? And were there authors who you admired growing up that influenced you?
Definitely. So my much older brother, he's like 15 years older than me. He gave me, when I was 15, he gave me a really beat up copy of David Sedaris Naked. And it's the first time I had ever seen writing like that. I was already reading like a lot. I've read a lot since I was a kid, but when I read that, it was this shift in how I thought about writing and what writing could be. I didn't know that like this kind of thing was even allowed. I didn't know anything about memoirs. I didn't know anything about. I had been reading fiction, and I think the way that I mean, he's hilarious. I mean, he's a humorist. Is kind of how he couches himself. He writes essays, but he's hilarious. But he's also just incredibly raw and honest about things that were going on in my head and in my life. Except it was like just this really intimate conversation or this person just kind of laying it all bare right there. So that was when I first was turned on to kind of like memoir, nonfiction type stuff. And definitely, I read every book of his after that for sure.
Fearless is a word that comes to mind when I think of him and his
Yeah,
writing. You know, he's not worried about quote unquote what he's supposed to do as a writer, right? He's just, you can feel him on the page, his voice, you know, he's not holding anything back. He's being himself. He's not afraid to laugh at things that normally we would think, oh, are you supposed to laugh at that? I don't know. And so then it like opens you up in this new way, right?
100%. Yeah, I think that's exactly it.
I remember feeling the same way when reading George Saunders for the first time and
Mhm.
being like, oh, fiction can do this? You're allowed to like goof around and like have fun while talking about dark themes. You're allowed to play around with voice, you know? I guess there's probably a lesson to be learned there as writers when we're like trying to figure out what's our voice, like how, you know, how do we start stories, like what's important to a story, what makes a story good, whether that's an essay or a fiction piece. There's something to be learned there about not holding back, not being afraid.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, George Saunders is a great example. Didn't you have him on the show?
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And yeah, I agree with all that.
So tell me about your early experiences finding your voice as a writer, okay? So like David Sedaris, he's open, he's honest, he's very intimate. Do you try to have those attributes in your work? Do you think that those are the attributes that make a good personal essay? Tell us about your experience trying to find your voice and what you try to encapsulate in your work.
Yeah. I do think that those things are important to a personal essay. I don't think that they're necessarily like confessional is not the only way to go, obviously. There's so much great nonfiction that sort of doesn't do that lay it all bare thing. But it's my personal preference. And I think that you're on your way to writing a good essay if you can do those things for sure, no matter what you're writing about, I guess. And I I spent a lot of years doing other kinds of art, like a long, long time writing songs and making music and making visual art and doing all kinds of stuff. And I think that believe it or not, the songwriting especially helped me to find my voice. I actually don't have a good singing voice at all, but there's plenty of singers who are great in spite of that. Elliott Smith and um, a bunch of others.
Tom Waits.
Tom Waits, yeah, another great example. Connor Oberst. Um, so that really helped, and I think also by the time I started writing seriously and deciding like that was going to be what I wanted to study in school, I was a little bit older. And so I think that I had already sort of discovered my own style in a lot of other ways. So I was less afraid to just like do what I wanted on the page while trying to sort of fit that within the formal constraints. Because you can't just write a journal entry. There's so many things that you probably shouldn't do when you're trying to write an essay. So it was more like trying to fit my voice into the constraints of like what personal essays generally are. And then once I knew that is when I started sort of breaking those rules.
Do you think about those constraints when you're writing a first draft, or is that something that comes in during revision?
I think it depends. Um, I mean, for most of the stuff I've written, I think it comes during revision for sure. Like, I don't start with like what the skeleton is going to be, generally speaking. I don't know exactly what story I'm trying to tell. I just know I have this like flashbulb memory, um, something that's always stuck around for me. And I usually start there, and then kind of work my way through it. Cause I go through a lot of drafts. Like, I'm obsessive about that. I'll think an essay's done and then I'll have to tear it down to the studs and start it all over again because there's something about it that's just not feeling right to me. So I think finding what the essay wants to be takes a lot of time and a lot of revision for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a process too. Becoming comfortable with working on a draft, knowing I might just scrap this whole thing and rewrite it later, but I'm okay with that because I know through writing this draft, I'm going to learn something about the piece that's going to make the next draft better. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, it's never time wasted. It's
Right.
always just like time. They say what time at the canvas or whatever it is. There's no wasted paint. It's all sort of adding to whatever it is you're going to become.
Okay. So you mentioned that you've been a songwriter and a performer, right?
Less so performance.
Okay.
I was more like bedroom recorder, and I didn't really share my music. I was very like held it like close to the vest because I wasn't ready at that time to be exposed and have someone critique my work. I think at the end of the day, I just wasn't. I said it was because I thought people wouldn't understand, but I think it's really because I wasn't ready to have other people listen to my stuff or read my stuff and have an opinion on it.
Well, that's interesting because I want to talk to you about the relationship between a writer and a reader. So I was thinking about if you're a songwriter, if you're a performer, there's like a clear relationship between the work and the person who's like listening to the work, right? You're right there in the room together. It's interesting if you're just recording it and then putting it out there. It's similar to writing in a way. Where you write a story, you write an essay, and then you put it out there, but you're not usually coming face to face with someone, and almost never coming face to face with someone while they're taking in the work. So it's a different kind of relationship. But I'm curious how important you think that relationship is, and how much you think about the relationship between the writer and the reader when you're working on a piece.
Yeah. I mean, I think that feeling I had when I read David Sedaris was what I wanted for other people if they read my stuff. I wanted it to feel like this very intimate conversation. Like it's hard for me sometimes to share even stuff that's getting traction or published or whatever with people really close to me. It's easier for me to put my entire world out for a reader than it is for even some of the people who are closest to me because I feel like what that did for me, like reading that first time, how much freedom I felt. Um, I want to give that to the reader if I can. Like, I'm basically writing the stuff about the subject matter I'm writing about, which is nothing new, right? Like these drug dependence and um, going to jail. These aren't things that people haven't written about before. But what I wanted to do was write them in the way that I wished that 15-year-old self would want to have it presented, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you talked about how when you were writing songs, you weren't sure that you wanted to share them with people, right? You kept them close to the chest. And you've described yourself as a fairly private person in your personal life, but very open in your writing. So you told me that you're willing to share your experiences with any stranger willing to read. So what do you think it is about writing that allows for that honesty?
I think number one, I can make sure I haven't been misunderstood. Like I've read it so many times that I know exactly what I'm trying to say. And if someone it doesn't resonate with them or they don't like it, I know that's not because they're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Um, it's because we just don't vibe or whatever it is. That's not my reader. And that's totally fine with me. Like my work isn't for everyone, but like at least I know that I haven't misspoken or I haven't been taken out of context or anything like that.
Okay, so then let's circle back to that original question that was kind of on my mind when all of this started. You write a lot about your experience with addiction and mental health. How important has writing been to you in processing those experiences?
It's interesting you ask because I've had several mentors, and one of them was big on writing's not therapy. He would say that a lot. Writing isn't therapy, and I think what he was trying to say is you're not just trying to work something out for yourself. You're trying to present a clear narrative to your reader. So I always thought that like I wasn't allowed to sort of use my work to process. However, as time went on and I kind of understood more what he was really saying, um, I can look back on even those early pieces and see how much I learned about myself just through recalling the story, refining the narrative, all that kind of stuff. Because our memories are faulty, right?
Right.
And nothing is really as cohesive as we make it in our heads. We have to like develop a narrative for ourselves in order to sort of make sense of our past. But we're relying on faulty information where it's never going to be what actually happened. We're going to get so much of it wrong. If you asked another person what happened at that same exact time, it's going to be different.
Right.
But I do think having that narrative is incredibly important when discovering a sense of self, which I think I came to later in life, like for a bunch of different reasons. But I think I missed a really key portion of forming an identity as a kid due to like just childhood stuff, trauma, whatever you want to call it. Um, and so that's what's been really helpful with the writing is I've been able to sort of form a different view of myself and a sense of identity that is much different than the one that I had because I used to just kind of like hate my past, hate myself, like I was just a piece of shit, all that kind of stuff was just that's the narrative I had running in my head. And in putting it all on paper and telling a bunch of different stories and looking at it objectively, like I was able to say, yeah, there was tons of stuff I did that no one should be proud of. However, I was also like a young person in extreme crisis.
Yeah.
And so that's what's been really beneficial for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we can go back to that Joan Didion quote, the idea of I don't know what I think until I write it. In some ways, we don't know who we are until we write it, until it's outside of ourselves, right? Like, how do you look at yourself objectively from the inside? I don't know how to do it. I've never been able to do it, but there is something about putting it down on paper, setting it aside for a bit, coming back to it. Suddenly it's outside yourself. And it's like, oh, I can approach this story, this essay more objectively than I can approach myself. So although writing is not therapy, I agree with that. Only therapy is therapy. There is something therapeutic about it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I came to is like, it's not therapy, but it can be therapeutic. I think that's the perfect way to put it.
Right. Okay, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but I want to talk about it a little bit more. There are a lot of writers who have explored the themes and experiences that you're exploring in your writing. So, how do you look for unique perspectives or lenses through which to explore your stories? Is that something you think about, how to look at it in a unique or different way?
I think it's something that just happened. And it happened over time and with experience. Like that same mentor said, you shouldn't write about anything until 20 years after the fact. He wasn't being totally serious, but like kind of, like you have perspective, especially if you're writing personal essays. So I think a lot of things changed for me in my personal life that just sort of led me to naturally write differently about these things. And I think that there's a pretty common story of like quote unquote recovery out there and like what that looks like and what that should be and what that means, um and who gets to say like who's recovering and who isn't. I really started challenging a lot of those things in my own life and challenging my own story in really meaningful ways. And so I think that led me to naturally start writing about it in a different way. Like most people who are quote unquote, if you want to talk about recovery, right, you're talking usually NA or AA, and those are things I participated in for a long time. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned I I changed my life drastically. Like that's great. But there's an exclusivity to that world that I just couldn't be a part of anymore. And so me coming out and writing a piece that says, hey, instead of trying to force people to get clean, why don't we meet them where they're at? And until we can meet them where they're at, why can't we maybe supply them with drugs that aren't poison? Like in the NA world, that's like I'm on I had to like hide myself. Like I'm on something called Suboxone, which is medically assisted treatment. And in those circles, that means I'm still getting high, basically, because it's like opioid replacement therapy. And so like I had to hide that whole part of my life. So even in this place where I'm supposed to be completely honest about everything, like I have to hide this one aspect of myself. And I did that for like 7 or 8 years. Some people close to me knew, but like that seems off to me. There's something about that that doesn't sound right because like I got all the same benefits that everyone else did. As long as no one knew that I was on it, it didn't matter, right? But if they did, it would have changed the way that I was looked at by basically everyone. And so I think that's how those lenses get developed is like I'm looking back now through this lens of, wow, that's kind of messed up that it needs to be like that, that there's only this one way to do things. And so now I'm part of my writing is advocacy, I think. And again, writing the things that I wish I could have read at some point.
Yeah, I think the stuff you're writing about is really interesting. It's like we said, open, honest. It's a unique perspective, and it's important work. I really do think so. So I definitely encourage listeners to go to james-t-morrison.com, look up your work, and check out that podcast you were on, the Death, Sex, and Money podcast, because you talk about a lot of these things on there. And I really do think it's an important take and a new perspective that people need to hear for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about your academic journey a bit and how you ended up pursuing the MFA. So you attended college later than most, finishing your bachelor's degree when you were 39 years old. So tell us about your decision to go back to school at that age and what that experience was like.
So yeah, that was part of I had been going to City College for probably close to 15 years, on and off, taking large gaps. And then I decided to like do the recovery thing to get quote unquote sober, whatever that means what it means to me. And it was part of that journey that I was like, all right, I need to go back to school. But I thought I was going to go to law school. I thought I was going to go like be a public defender somewhere, and help people in disadvantaged positions, because of what I had been through with the justice system. But I was able, as the first year Fresno State was offering creative writing as like a discipline in undergrad. That I was It was the first year when I went there, and so I was like, well, I might as well do that because it's what I had already been doing workshops and things like that, and as part of my AA. And so I decided that I was going to just take as many workshops as I could. And I took some fiction workshops and got a lot of encouragement, a lot of great feedback. And yeah, shout out Tanya Nichols. She really helped me see that I had something if I wanted it, basically, though I didn't really believe that at the time. And then when I took an upper division nonfiction course with John Hales, again, shout out John Hales, the dude who's responsible for me not going to law school, basically. Now that I have this super marketable MFA degree, um, just kidding, it's wonderful. I love it. But yeah, he sort of let me know that if it was something I wanted to do, that because I knew it was really competitive, and I just didn't really think that my stuff was that competitive. And he was the one who told me that it was, and that if I wanted to do it, I could. Basically, like, if you want to do this, you can. And that was where I sort of moved away from the law school route and started applying to MFA programs instead.
Was the MFA on your radar at all before then? Had you heard of it? It's a thing that you'd thought about? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think and I was lucky enough to be, as you mentioned, I was the managing editor of the Normal School. I'm still the nonfiction editor of the Normal School, but way back when I was at, in like that 15-year period when I was going to City College, I knew about the Normal School, and it was the first time that I heard there was a nonfiction discipline. I didn't know that there was an MFA for nonfiction stuff. I mean, it hasn't been around for that long. And so it was through the Normal School and Stephen Church that that was something that I knew about and had thought about doing. But yeah, wasn't so sure getting an arts degree at 40 was that's a big swing. That's a really
Right.
big swing. And at least it was for me. So yeah, that's why I wasn't going to do it, but it was certainly on my radar.
Tell us about that decision. I mean, it must have not been an easy decision, right? Law school and MFA, they feel very, very different to me.
They are worlds apart.
So, yeah, tell us about making that decision.
I think at my core, I knew I wanted to make art. And that's what I had been doing for years and years and years before when I decided to stop um, drinking the way I was and using the way I was. I kind of stopped making art at the same time and thought that I would go sort of on this more, I don't know, like, solid path towards something that was really concrete. I had a very close mentor who was a doctor, and he went and became an MD way later on in his life. And it worked out really well for him. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be a doctor. I know that much about myself, but maybe a lawyer would be another way to go. I have the grades and whatever. But once I started writing again, I just couldn't not do it. Once I found out that I had that opportunity to write, and that was something that, like, basically once someone told me I had a shot, because that's what I didn't believe, is that I had any kind of shot at this, um, is when I was like, okay. And I'm in a very fortunate, privileged position as well. Like, I have, my wife and partner, Sarah, um, is gainfully employed. And so I was able to sort of take a risk as well that I think a lot of people can't take. Or I don't know, it's harder to make that decision. For me, it was plausible. It was something that I could do if I wanted to. So I think that was a major part of the decision as well.
Well, you ended up at Fresno State in Fresno, California, a 3-year program with tracks in poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction. What drew you to this program? Was it just Stephen Church and the Normal School?
Yeah, I mean, I applied to a few other programs and was really debating on whether or not to go to one of the funded programs. But moving out of state, at 40 at that time, all that comes along with that sounded like a lot. But it wasn't just that. I sort of cheated. Um, John Hales he let me sit in on an MFA workshop as an undergrad. So I got to see what the program had to offer. And I think that's what really sealed the deal for me is because, like, you can go to a prestigious program, you can go to a funded program, but there's no guarantee you're like what you're going to get exactly. Like, a lot of times there's big name authors at these places, but they don't have time to sit with you for hours at a time. They have their own career to worry about. And you may not get that time. You may not. But I knew what I was going to get. And I loved the people, I loved the students in the program, and I loved the faculty in the program. So it seemed like a no-brainer to me, especially after they offered me, it's not a funded program, but they offered me as much as they could, which was enough to like get me in the door.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to talk about funding later on, but yeah, that chance to sit in on a workshop, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. I mean, like on this podcast, we're trying our best to give people some sense of what it's like to be in the programs, because the reality is it's just so opaque. You apply to these places and you just don't know what it's going to be like until you're accepted. And sometimes even beyond that, you don't know until you get there, right? And like you mentioned, a lot of these programs have big name authors, but the big name authors, their number one job is writing. And so they might only be working one semester a year, doing one workshop that everyone wants to be in. They might go on sabbatical to write their next novel. You just don't know. So that's another risk, right? Applying to and accepting a position at a program because of one author that you want to work with, you might not even get to work with them, right? So that's one thing to think about for sure if you're a listener, and that's something you're considering. But yeah, being able to sit in on a workshop, that's huge.
It was. I had the that's the other thing that I want to mention is I had the opportunity to read the books of the people I was going to be learning from. And indie presses put out really great books, and people who write for indie presses write really great books, sometimes often my favorite books. And so just because someone's not getting a deal with the big five doesn't mean they're not a super legit writer. And
Right.
both Stephen Church and John Hales, I knew could teach me what I needed to know because I had read their work. So I think that's like a really important thing to think about too. Like, don't just go because of a name. Like, research those people, like look up what they've written, read their work and see if you vibe with them, because that's way more important than getting like some big name school. I mean, look, you come out of Iowa, you're going to have advantages. There's just no way of getting around that. But that should not be the end all be all goal.
And finding work that you vibe with, that's a two-way street. So if you find a professor at a program who's writing work that you really love, that really resonates with you, that you feel like is in conversation with what you're doing, that's going to be somebody that you'll enjoy working with. But in my experience, it also increases the chance that they're going to read your application and say, oh, this is someone who's in conversation with my work and who I want to work with. So it's going to increase your chances of actually getting into that program, I think.
100%. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about faculty, professors. Stephen Church was on your radar. You went to Fresno State's MFA. I'm curious to hear you talk about your experience working with the faculty and how important mentorship has been to your MFA experience.
So I've had all these I've lucked into a bunch of stuff. So one of the things I lucked into is they were hiring a new professor for the program when I was in my first year. And so I got to sit in on those interviews and kind of give my opinion on who I might like to see in the program. And so in my second year, Brenna Womer came on board, and she's another person who just opened me up to a whole new world of publishing opportunities. And just, I mean, her writing is wonderful, but she's also just so well versed in what's going on in that world, which is also very important. Like, you want faculty who's going to be able to sort of point you in the right direction. Like, it's hard to know where to start with lit mags. It's hard to know where to start with where to send your stuff, because not every piece is going to be the right fit for every magazine. And so, yeah, I mean, working with her was amazing. I can't say enough how the generosity of like the amount that my mentors, the three people I've mentioned, gave me their time and energy on a regular basis, like even over the summer. While some professors are saying, "Oh, nope, I don't do anything over the summer. I'm not into that." Like they just wanted to do anything they could to help me. And that mentorship, I think, pushed me over the edge. Like I know for sure that I wouldn't be where I am right now if it weren't for the people I mentioned and the time that they gave me. Like I went to an MFA because I knew I couldn't do it on my own. Like if you can write a book on your own, go do that. Don't go to school. Like you don't need to really. If you really think you can write like a solid, crafted, like well thought out project on your own, do that. I knew that I couldn't, that I needed guidance and direction. And so that's the other thing. I sought out that guidance. I sought out that direction as much as I possibly could. And so fortunately, I was met with, "Oh, you want to know more? We have time to tell you more. We have time to give you more."
So we've talked a lot about relationships with faculty, mentorship. How is the writing community in Fresno amongst the students within the MFA program and within the community of Fresno itself?
So Fresno State and Fresno in general is like a sleeper program and a sleeper city. Like if you look at the number of poet laureates, if you look at the amount, especially in the poetry world, if you look at the names that continue to come, Anthony Cody, Miter Vang. I mean, she's not from here, but she's here now. Like there are so many people who are just crushing it, and yet it doesn't have that like literati feel to it. Everything is very accessible, but there's a lot of literary history and a lot of support. Like it's not, a lot of times people feel like in competition with one another. I think in writing programs, especially, it's like you're competing with other students, you're even competing with faculty or people in the community, whatever it is. There is like no sense of that. There was no sense of like we're competing against each other. It was 100% purely just like we're behind each other and want to support each other in any way that we possibly can. And I think it's important for people to think about that kind of thing when they're looking for an MFA program as well, because it's not always the prestigious schools that necessarily have really, really, I mean, they have really great programs. That's why they're prestigious.
Sure.
But like, again, Fresno State, I don't think is on the top of many people's like MFA lists. It's not funded for one, but that doesn't mean it's not affordable. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to get like a top-notch education from it.
Right. Right. Yeah. When I was doing a bit of research for this interview, I was kind of amazed by how many books have been published by people who have been through the MFA at Fresno State. It seems to be pretty prolific in that regard.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I got to do an internship that was strictly concerned with Fresno poetry and Fresno poets. And the amount of work I saw, I mean, it filled a whole volume just with Fresno poets and poetry. And that's what really let me know that, oh, like I'm really in a literary community. It's just also kind of a hard scrabble place that it's working class, it's no frills, it's not LA, it's not San Francisco, it's its own thing, which again, for my vibe was perfect.
All right, so we've mentioned a couple of times the really great literary magazine, The Normal School. Stephen Church, who we've mentioned, was the founding editor of that magazine, which is published through the MFA program at Fresno State. And you, as you've mentioned, have had the privilege of working there in your time in the program. You're still working as a nonfiction editor of the magazine. I want to hear about that opportunity and how students can take advantage of that opportunity while they're in the program, and also what your experience has been like.
The Normal School, again, this is like one of those sleeper things, right? Like Fresno State's program may not be on a top 10 list, but the Normal School is a well-respected literary magazine that people want to be in. And if you're looking for editorial jobs, if you're looking for anything in the publishing world, having worked at the Normal School is like a big get. And for me, because that magazine is the one that sort of turned me on to the program itself, turned me on to the nonfiction MFA, like even way back when I was still at City College, I dreamt of working at the Normal School. So for me, it was like a dream come true. And it was everything that I could have hoped, because Stephen is both laid back, but also very instructive. and let us really decide what we wanted to do with the magazine, but was always there with any kind of help with some of the more technical aspects, or if we needed his opinion on a particular essay or story. So it's a student run magazine that's still very much attached to sort of like a prestigious literary tradition.
And so if you're an MFA student in this program and you want to work on that magazine, can you? Or is there an application process? How does that work?
Yes, there's an application process, but I mean, the chances that you'll get to work on the magazine are high. If it's something you really want, at the very least as a reader. But, you know, if you show interest, I think that's the thing with the program is if you show interest, the opportunities will present themselves. And that's all you really have to do is show interest.
All right. So we've mentioned a couple times that Fresno State's program is not fully funded, which means the students who go there are not each guaranteed funding as part of the program. But it sounds like you did receive some funding. So I want to hear about what funding opportunities are available to students and how applicants should think about that as they're considering Fresno State.
The big one is the Edward and Alberta Brown for your first year. That's a large scholarship that should take care of most of your first year. And then there are lots of little scholarships after that that definitely help. I was very fortunate. I got a lot of scholarships. You know, they wanted me to come to the program, so I think that they really just put their best foot forward and gave me a lot. That said, there's lots of other funding opportunities as well, like for creative activities grants. Like I got a large, $3,500 grant from Gracchus. And there are so many ways to get funding if you hustle. And the other part of that is Fresno State, as far as college goes, is inexpensive. It does not cost what most colleges cost. And so even with a little bit of funding, you can really get by.
So those scholarship opportunities, those grants that you're mentioning, are those through the university or are those outside the university? Does the program help students to find those? How does that work?
Yes. Like all except for the grants I got, all of the scholarships I got were basically just given to me. Like they did a lot of, I mean, they obviously had to fill out an application and do the things you have to do to get a scholarship, any scholarship. I was told what to apply for, how to apply for it, when to apply for it. There's a shout out Jefferson Beavers. He's a communications director at Fresno State. He is just the most helpful individual on earth. He'll be behind you the whole way, especially when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like to me, if you apply to Fresno State and you get accepted, the best thing you can do is be upfront and honest with them about what you need and ask them, how can I get this? Can you help me get this in order to attend the program?
Yes.
And it sounds like they'll do what they can to try to help you find that.
Exactly. Yeah. Because they want to draw people in, you know, they want to draw talent from everywhere.
Awesome. Okay. So before we go, the last question I ask all of my guests, what is one way in which the MFA experience has been different, for better or for worse, from your expectations when applying?
Well, like I said, I cheated. So I kind of already knew what the program was going to be about before I went. However, I think it surprised me to be able to be a part of the hiring process for new faculty. Like I got to really be a part of that process. And they picked the person that, I mean, not because I wanted them, but the person that I would have chosen is the person they chose. And because of that, I got like one of the best mentors on earth. So I couldn't have expected that before going in because she didn't yet work at the program.
And who's your mentor? Say it again.
Brenna Womer is one of my mentors. Stephen Church, Brenna Womer, John Hales. Those are my folks who really did a lot for me.
Okay. And it sounds like they deserve some shout outs.
They do, big ones.
Your experience sounds like a good one. Your writing, I know, is very good, and your experience super interesting. I appreciate your openness, your honesty, and taking the time to come here and chat with me. It's been really, really nice getting to know you.
Yeah, you too, Jared. Thank you so much.